Hey everyone, it's Joe. Welcome to another episode of the Future Business Analyst podcast. My guest today is Yulia Kosarenko, owner of Why Change Consulting Inc., professor at Humber College in Toronto. She's the author of the book Business Analyst, A Profession and a Mindset, as well as being a conference speaker, a consultant, and a trainer. In fact, another all-round business analysis enthusiast. Welcome to the show, Yulia.
Thank you, Joe. It's great to be here.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you here. The place I usually like to start with these is your start in business analysis, how you first got involved in the profession and what it is about the profession that keeps you going, keeps you involved. So perhaps you can share your starting story with us.
Of course, it depends how far back I should go with that. But if I were to go to the very beginning, it all started with a book on programming from a local library, a book on Fortran, many years ago, which really made me interested in information technology. And then I ended up going into computer science degree. I was really interested in programming and I thought I'm going to be a programmer, but then things got, a little boring. I ended up getting involved with, I guess, business side of things all the time and asking questions and working with stakeholders. And I was unhappy being just a developer. And then when I moved to Canada, I decided it's time to figure out what I truly want to do. So I did some personality surveys. I went to see a career consultant. We had a lot of chats. And then somehow from all these conversations, I figured out business analysis sounds great because it allows me to work with people. So the pivoting point for me was that I like to work with people and I like to understand why am I doing things or why do you need to do a certain change or write a program. And that's where I started. So I took a few courses. I got my first job as a BA, and from then on, BA, BSA, Elite BA, business architect, and I could never give up. So I'll always be, I guess, a business analyst at heart. Even when I see when I'm buying the tickets and things don't work, or I'm going on a website and there's a strange label, and I get all upset and I say they didn't have a good business analyst.
Yeah, I think that's in us all. A lot of blogs, a lot of posts are always about these experiences that we have where they don't go quite how we might like them to go. That sort of logic or that experience. I think that's wonderful, and it sounds like a lot of people fall into this job. It's quite accidental, but I'm hearing a slightly different story from you. That this was a very conscious decision based on certainly some of the experiences that you'd had in programming and similar roles. And it sounds like because you say you were sort of working in the business, but you had this programming, you sort of already had that balance of perhaps the two sides of a business analyst when you got into the role.
Yeah, I think I had both. I ended up realizing that if I worked on the technical side, I always, so to speak, put my nose into business side of things. And at times when I ended up working for business, I was always interfering with what developers did and wanted to know what they're doing and talk to them. So I was always in the middle and I always wanted to see both sides and how they interact, which literally then I realized sounds like business analysis. That's exactly what it is for. So I think it was partially conscious choice because I did go through that exercise of career counseling,
Okay.
but partially it was just realization that I don't want to give up on technology, on understanding how programming works. I'm still interested, but I don't want to give up on working with people. I couldn't sit in a cubicle all day and program, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I think the first question I want to come to you with, based on that little background that you shared, is I suppose first of all you've been in this role a little while. Back sort of analyst programmer days. That's sort of what I'm picking up, and maybe over time, you've got experience of what the business analyst job is. You also dropped in a few different job titles there. Some were probably synonyms for the business analyst. Some are roles that dovetail, like the architect. But given that you've spent some time in this profession, have you seen the definition of business analysis change from sort of then until now? And then the follow-up question would be, do you maybe see the business analyst job role changing from now into the future, and what might those changes that you've seen be and those ones you foresee be?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I think that earlier on, especially as I guess early business analysts were evolving from requirements engineer role or even just software engineer role. Business analysis definition was probably more software oriented. It was more about software requirements, defining requirements, capturing, documenting them, and gradually it evolved to look more at the business side and starting with understanding the business needs first and then trying to translate it into requirements. So I think probably the BSA or system analyst role probably is a little older in that sense, because at that time really it was interaction of requirements or software engineer with business directly. Even at some point, I worked in a company where I was business systems analyst, but I had a business analyst counterpart. And I think now, really, this definition becomes a little bit closer to business, to understanding business needs. Because again, even if you think about software engineering itself, it evolved. Nobody writes in code anymore. Our software languages and the exercise of coding becomes more high level. So it becomes closer to natural language and it becomes more about problem definition. And I think that impacts B role as well. And now, again, if you think in the past, so many projects involved only one system. So you ended up as system analyst, you work on one system, you write use case specifications for that system, you create sequence diagrams for that system. But it's so different now, because if you look at the typical landscape of even medium-sized company, let alone big company, it's so complex. There are so many different products and systems interacting. So it's more not about system analysis. It's about developing solutions and a solution for business. And I know I'm threading into architecture, but I think that's because business analysis is coming closer. We were even talking about it in my circle today. What's the difference between system and solution? It's not the same thing. Solution to support business capability may include 10 systems, 15 integrations, 5 external sources, and so many processes, right? So business analysts now are concerned with solutions that support business capabilities. And that can be much bigger than just, being an expert in one system and how that works.
Yeah, and as I was listening to you, I was seeing you sort of transfer into sort of enterprise architecture, maybe business architecture, that kind of thing, because it is hugely important. As you say, things used to be simpler, and these days they're much more complex. And when we introduce something new, we need to understand A, what we're introducing, and B, the landscape that we are introducing it to. So I'm definitely picking up from you that you see sort of closer ties between sort of business analysis and business architecture. And of course, they share a lot of the same thinking and a lot of the same skills. Are there any other trends that you see coming along aside business architecture?
Absolutely. And I know that there's one trend that definitely is on everyone's mind nowadays, and that's data analytics and AI and machine learning. That definitely is an important trend. I don't think that AI will replace business analysts. I think, if anything, business analysts need to become more of an advisors to business in terms of the limitations of AI, its capabilities, but also limitations, and what inputs to create so that you get, I guess, outputs from this new technology. So I think business analysts need to be very savvy of new technologies being developed and how they can be used to solve business problems. AI is just one of them, but definitely there are others. And I think that human aspect of business analysis profession is not only going away, it's becoming even more important because we interact with human beings on projects, we do things together, we collaborate, we facilitate that meetings, interactions, and someone has to do that. That becomes even more important. Our projects become more transcend countries now, transcend time zones, transcend different cultures.
Mm.
So I think that element of bringing people together and creating shared understanding of what's the problem and shared understanding of how we want to solve it is a crucial role, and it will only grow.
There were some great points in there, Yulia. I first loved how you framed AI. It's not going to replace us. That's sort of talking towards AI being a competitor, right? Competing with us over something. But you reframed it as being one of the many solution options that might be available to solve a business problem. So it becomes a tool for us in that sense, right? Perhaps a tool for us as business analysts that we can use to do our work, but also a tool for business so that they can run their operations in better ways. I can also hear that you've put some thought into this. So let's go down a little path here before we come back to some of the other stuff. Can you maybe give us some examples of how you see AI supporting the BA role and what we do?
I'll tell you what I'm dreaming of and hoping
Oh,
for that AI can do for all business analysts. Documentation, dare I say that?
yeah,
To me, again, and maybe because you can say I'm old school, I'm from the school that values documentation, and I still do. And I think that without documentation, our communication suffers because misinterpretations, ambiguities come into play. And we all know how nobody likes to do documentation. Nobody likes to take meeting notes, and it sometimes falls through the cracks. So you'll have that long meeting, and you'll have a video recording of that meeting, but there are no notes, there are no summary. Who is going to rewatch the recording to extract like three important nuggets? So honestly, even if we could just use AI to summarize meetings for us, to summarize documentation, to help with the research and information collection, I think this is going to be truly a huge help from an intelligent tool. Because making conclusions from those notes may require thinking, where business analysts can bring additional value. But that more mechanical work that we all realized, like the language summarization and extraction of important points that AI tools can do well, I think that could help. And imagine if it freed up analysts from all the tedious tasks of capturing things. You know how sometimes they say, oh, how can you facilitate a meeting without a scribe? So imagine the AI is doing all this intelligent scribing, smart scribing, but you are still the one who goes to the trenches, so to speak. So, because AI, if you think about it, AI can only regurgitate information that was already collected, right? It just
yeah,
pre-processes it, it looks for the most probable
yeah,
outcomes. So it's all secondary information,
yeah,
and you as analyst, you can get new primary information. You can observe the process, you can listen to customers, you can look at customer surveys, you can speak to your business, so you can gather new information to have some fresh ideas and thoughts. And then I think we all need to learn how to use AI as a tool for us to be more productive so that we can do, I guess, more high level thinking tasks.
yeah. It's sort of like hard labor, isn't it? Sometimes that
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
documentation, and it will be
Yeah.
wonderful to be able to have some support with that. I think the caveat is that that support must be good. You and I were talking about transcriptions before the show
Yeah.
started, and the accuracy around spelling and things. So obviously we're still at risk of perhaps the products that AI produce being a little substandard, not just misspellings, but like you say, if it's trying to find those nuggets, it's trying to highlight the salient points for us, we are going to perhaps need to check its work. I mean, certainly at the beginning, I know that this is going to evolve over time and get better. And that started to make me think, it's like, you know, in the past we produced documentation, and the idea is that we then have a peer that we can give that work to, and they can cast their eye over it, you know, and maybe point out some things we don't see. So maybe we need to sort of peer review AI's work going forward, and sort of we just see a little shift in the responsibility on documentation. Is that something that you maybe see happening?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's a great idea. And it probably even goes both ways because we need
Yeah,
to cross check what AI has produced, but also we can use AI to validate our own documentation. And I think of one company where I started my BA career here in Canada, we had a really good system of peer reviews. We had a big, large group of analysts. We had a rotation, and it was like a community work. Like you had to review someone's work a couple of times a month because and as I am writing it, I don't see my own contradictions because I'm kind
yeah,
of deep in that thinking. It's like similar to discussion we just had whether it's okay to be a BA and QA in a split role. I know that sometimes happens, but if you think about it, I like my QA partner to catch my mistakes,
mm,
right? And sometimes a good QA will say, "Hey, this doesn't make sense. Oh, I can't test this.
yeah,
Come on." But if you're doing both roles, you don't see it, right? Because
yeah,
you just wrote it. You think it's total. And same with peer reviews. AI can probably catch some contradictions
yeah,
and gaps. I hope so.
yeah,
Or we probably can train it. Imagine if you had the tool that you are training to look for certain things, that you have that feedback loop going when you cross-reference it, and then it's learning what you're looking for. So I think it's both ways we can definitely use it. I agree we have to check things, and as analysts probably we are doing it anyway. But just having someone else to do summarization and then us review that, I think it would be huge boost in terms of productivity and also in helping us maybe see our own shortcomings.
yeah. And it might also stop people saying we need a scribe. Where's the BA? You know, they can maybe point to
Exactly.
somebody else to
Yes.
do it. Um,
Yes.
what sort of what sort of skills are we going to need going forward? I'm sort of trying to think what you said earlier. I feel like you used the word creativity, but I'm not sure if I was replacing one of your words with my words. You mentioned people at the beginning, and that we can get some support here. So if some of those things are taken away from us, what sort of skills are going to come to the fore? Are they skills that we've already got, or are there going to be some new skills that we need to develop as well?
Yeah. I'm sure there will be new skills we will need to develop. Some of them we may realize, some of them we may not realize yet. We just have to be, I guess, constantly assessing it. Definitely, I guess the skill of using AI tools is a skill. We need to practice it. It's on my long list of things to practice more and kind of figure out how I can do it. Um, I think one of the skills we already have that I want to emphasize, I believe we will need it going forward until AI can do it. And I don't know, it doesn't do it yet, is modeling, is creating models and diagrams.
Yeah.
Because AI is not good at creating pictures. And I've read some interesting experiments done about it and, pretty big fails, so to speak.
Okay.
So I think that ability to draw on screen to make a simple picture as you're brainstorming or you're trying to understand the context of a problem or just drawing a mind map, it is still a mostly human ability. So Until AI learns how to do it even better, and I'll believe it when I see it, I think that becomes a very, very critical issue. Because if you think about anything that we can express in language, whether we write requirements or whether we put user stories in a backlog or whether we get AI to summarize, 200 hours of videos for us, it's still expressed as language. And whenever we have large volumes of language for our brain, it's very hard to understand the structure of all that content, to understand the interconnection between pieces, even if there are headings and subheadings still. And most of all, I think it's hard for us to assess validity and completeness and contradictions when it's just a lot of text. Our brains and also AI brains, I don't think always can catch that. So creating diagrams and models help us to establish connections between pieces and see the structure better and determine if something is missing. Because once you put it in a picture, you suddenly say, oh, how about this? There seems to be an empty space here. So that ability to model not only is still important, but I think becomes even more important for us in business analysis process, because we always needed it. We need it even more now because of the complexity of the problems we are facing, and also because sometimes there's text just becomes overwhelming, you know.
Yeah. I'm glad you pulled it back to modelling. After you spoke last, I had about three questions in my head, and I probably went with the wrong one into skills. So I'm actually going to pull it back a little bit to modelling. So I was going to say to you, from that documentation that you were talking about, like handing that documentation over, I was thinking quite narrowly, but quite deliberately narrowly, about requirements documents, user stories, that kind of like paperwork.
Yeah.
But I do think there is opportunity to get into modeling, whether it's a data model or a process model. You lifted it up a bit higher to that sort of initial sort of rich picture, mind map
Mhm.
kind of stuff. But and if I think about analysis, there's sort of two main parts to it. I know I'm going to summarize this probably too simply for many people now, but there's logic and there's creativity. Those are essentially the two parts of it. And you were mentioning at the beginning that it was that logical approach, that problem solving that sort of attracted you to get into the role. And I do feel like AI can probably play a part with logic, okay? Because logic is like maths in a way, and something like AI should be able to do engineering structures where there's fixed rules and guidelines, as long as it's got those rules and it knows those dependencies and it knows the language to speak in back. So do you think we could maybe reach a point where some of those diagrams that we typically produce as part of systems analysis are getting initial straw man versions delivered by AI?
I certainly think it's possible. I would never want to say no, because I don't truly know all the capabilities of AI, and probably we don't know. So I believe that we will experiment with it, and we should, because anything that we can, create to make us more productive should be useful. Probably we can separate, that creativity, as you talked about rich pictures, that level of creativity comes from us coming up with analogies or maybe some cultural representations, right? So
Yeah.
choosing a picture where some like synonyms, it's like using figures of speech, where sometimes we're still more proficient than AI because of the, like maybe we have a little private joke in our company and this is how we usually do things. But I think more structured models,
Mm.
and I'm thinking more about systems analysis and design, probably things like data models. I mean, hopefully, I know we can auto generate ERDs,
Mm.
but going a little into conceptual modeling, wouldn't it be nice if we could analyze, say, like a whole bunch of knowledge-based information, like
Mm.
user manuals, instructions, everything
Yeah.
else, and generate a conceptual model out of that. It probably is realistic. I certainly would be interested in seeing how it develops. And again, maybe just as a tool, and then you look at it and you validate it and you add things to it, or maybe you reconnect things or rename things. But it might actually point you to something you are missing, because as humans, I think, just because of limitations in our processing capacity, we can't hold too many things in our brains. That's why we capture things in
Definitely.
pictures. Yeah. So if it's a very complex landscape, and for example, if the timing is short, and if you need to, or I was just one of my an analyst in my previous meeting was just mentioning, hey, what do I do if I get involved? She gets assigned to a new project when almost all design is done and they're getting
Mm,
into testing. How I quickly catch up? Wouldn't be nice if she had a mind map that would
yeah,
help her grab the right knowledge at the right time. So I think we are getting actually, Joe, more to knowledge management,
yeah,
which I think requirements management is a very good foundation to build knowledge management for an enterprise on. So AI, I think, is a very good tool to experiment with knowledge management, because it's another thing, just like documentation, that all organizations say they want to have and nobody spends time on,
mm,
because it's hard to prove the ROI, and then you end up with a lot of knowledge, in the brains of people and
yeah.
in the code, and none of it in an easily accessible way.
Yeah, yeah, and it's always done later on when somebody actually needs to know that for some future implementation. Um, I also think, part of what we do is about coming up with solution options. There are, a bit of an English phrase here, but there are many ways to skin a cat. I don't know if you're familiar with that phrase, but there are different options. So I feel like as well, because of this logic, we could throw some stuff at it and it could come up with different permutations, different versions of things, and then that's something for us to sift and sort through. But let's come to this word human. I feel like we've perhaps covered the machine world for now. Yeah, I think there's a lot of background research that can be done with AI. I think it can take away a lot of the grunt work. As you highlighted there, it's sort of a consolidation of stuff that's already known, that's in the past, that's knowledge, that's not new. And part of the traits of the human is the ability to come up with some new, that creative stuff. Do you see, and you talked earlier about, getting closer and closer to the face of the business. How do you see the BA role evolving? Do you see it changing? Do you see our responsibilities growing when it comes to business, when it comes up to creativity?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and you know, uh, sometimes I see business analysts becoming too distant from business. And I have this picture that I used in one of my articles of just peaks of the skyscrapers above the clouds, and you're somewhere up there, and you have very vague idea what is truly happening in business. And I think that sometimes our projects fail and our requirements don't hit the mark when we're too far away. Or we expect product owner to know everything, and that product owner has been on the ground 5 years ago. So I think that the further we are from from the trenches, from the field, from the manufacturing floor, the harder it is for us to see. So we also, like AI, become just processors of
Mm,
pre-processed information that someone collected for us. So perhaps this is where because if you think about it, we can gather new information with all of our senses, right? We have the auditory senses, we can see things, we can listen. Maybe we are going to be more like investigative reporters that actually go and see what's happening. Because if you think what's happening with the news today, a few reporters report on the news, and then 300 different news engines just reproduce the same news from secondary information. So maybe that observing or that immersion or talking to customers is what is needed to bring fresh data into this world of, because yeah, we will have lots of tools to process the data, but if
mm.
you don't feed it with fresh data, with new ideas, we're just going to be kind of in the rut and just spinning our wheels in place. So I think that definitely maybe one of the directions is being more observer and experimenter. And
Mm,
I think that also allows you to maintain that human connection with people. other than just sitting somewhere in the office and reviewing information. On the other hand, I mean, we should be using data more. So that's another interesting, I think, development for the future. If you think of 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whenever you ask business analysts what do they do, the first thing they mention would be process models, right?
Yeah, exactly.
EPMN, I create process models, which is very important. We still do that. We still need to do that. But if you think about it, we develop process models from the words of other people, from secondary information, or maybe from observation, and we're observing just one of the many possible paths. So things like process mining, for example, can completely change how you look at process modeling and process analysis. Or instead of us describing using words, if then else, and all the decision points in the process, maybe we are going to start using embedded analytics more and get data. So I think we can use some of the abilities to use data instead of just these like logic and derivation rules to completely change how we manage some of this process optimization. So it's interesting, right? On one side, we use more and more tools and technology and data. On the other side, we don't want to lose that human connection aspect. I think that would be very dangerous.
Well, it is, and as you're speaking, I'm thinking that's really the risk that you're highlighting. If we sort of come back to one of the questions that's probably on people's lips at the moment, it's will AI replace my job? Am I at risk of being automated by AI? And as you're talking, I'm realizing the answer to that is yes, if you don't bring any human elements into your work. As you say, if you're just that person in the back office, you're sort of processing stuff, you're that knowledge worker, then yes, there is a chance that part of your job is at risk. And unless you start to get more customer focus, more at the coal face, getting out off your bum behind the desk onto the
Yeah,
shop floor, then there's a chance.
there is a chance. Yeah, and maybe that's where if we can go deviate a little bit into decision support, because truly, I mean, we need AI, we need data, and we need business analysis. A lot of times, truly, what is the outcome of that is making better business decisions,
Yeah.
right? So, and that, I guess, the reason I also thought about it is because of bias. Because if you think about what else we need humans for when we use AI, is we need to constantly be monitoring for bias, because AI and machine learning is a little bit like self-fulfilling prophecy. It keeps trending towards the average or the larger group,
Yeah.
and that's where models become biased. Well, who is going to monitor for bias and how we will monitor it? Maybe that's where we need humans and high critical thinking to constantly monitor and evaluate any models that we use for biases, for basically discriminating against
Yeah.
exceptional cases. There's an excellent book on the topic. It's called Weapons of Mass Destruction, which really looks into this exceptional cases, how sometimes the model on average performs really well, but it can truly hurt some individual people that just don't fit it. So I think that if we think about decision augmentation versus decision automation, this is where we need humans, where AI may be capable of solving, say, 80% of straightforward cases, but we need to be able to segregate the cases that need review, that need human review, because maybe if we automate that, they will be falling to the bias of the model. So somehow we need to make sure that that monitoring and constant adjustment to avoid bias, to use new information, it needs to be managed by people who are, let me say, smarter than AI. Let me do
Yeah.
that. And maybe that's where business analysts can stand, is identifying when we need a human eye. For example, if you're a judge, how much fidelity is good enough for you to allow AI to make a decision in a court case? Is it 99%, or is it 95%, or is it 90%, or is it 99.9? And who is going to look at the borderline cases? So same, I think, with business decisions. And I think it's just worth a lot of research to identify which part of I guess the automation is valid, and where do we need to pay even more attention because of the tendency of AI models to fall victim to bias.
Yeah, I agree. It's sort of it's based on what it's based on. So it's like bias in, bias out, a bit like garbage in, garbage
Yeah.
out, right? So some of the questions that we need to be asking is what is the background of this particular AI tool? What's its foundation? Where did it get its information from? And also making sure that when we ask that question, we're not asking that question with a bias, that we're not looking for particular sources, that we've got some diversity in there, that it's holistic, that it's inclusive.
Yes. Yes.
And augmented decisions, business intelligence, that kind of thing, because we don't want to necessarily leave those decisions to AI, because I guess some people might be looking to AI and tools to give them decisions. And it's almost like, I mean, I've always felt that BAs are a little bit fearful of data, usually in the SDLC phase when it comes to modelling it. As you say, we're sort of, I do the processes, I perhaps don't step into data as much. And now that responsibility is extending, isn't it? Sort of beyond the product in order to support the business. Yeah, I think that'd be really good. Let's come back a bit. Sort of next question. Following on from before, you talked about maybe getting up from behind a desk, going out in the coalface. What do you think a typical? I know there's no such thing as a typical day because every day is never the same for a business analyst. But what might a typical week or month be like for a BA?
Yeah. Definitely much less sitting at the desk, for sure. All the typing and reviewing documentation, I think, is changing drastically. So perhaps all of us will have our own AI assistant that we can, talk to as we are going about and observing and communicating. Or maybe even, who knows, maybe at some point AI can take videos and analyze the content of that. Probably not unrealistic. So I think we are going to the places, I guess, where we can gather new information, which could be talking to real people, talking to experts. Maybe you are, I don't know, going to the store, going to the supermarket, or talking to experts. It honestly sounds a little bit like investigative journalism
Mm.
in a way, and communication with people. So that facilitation aspect, engaging people. Perhaps we don't have traditional meetings where everyone sits and looks at a PowerPoint desk, right? Hopefully that will
Wow.
be a thing of the past.
Yes.
But you still need to create discussions. So we talked about solutions option a little, right? And this is where sometimes you need that creativity. You need to look at your problem from a very different angle to come up with a different solution. So maybe that brainstorming aspect, or talking to your stakeholders, trying to truly understand the essence of their problem, to understand the root causes, or explain to them the results, for example, of preliminary analysis to help them generate the next level of questions or give you more information. So I think it's still a little bit sounds like that translation of technology
Mm.
outputs for business. I think what probably will change, I hope what will change is the level at which BAs will communicate. I hope they will communicate much more with middle and senior executives. Because today, I think there is a tendency that BA is an order taker. PM will tell them what to do. They'll just go ahead and execute it. But PMs don't necessarily, it's not their job to get into the essence of business problems, right? That's what BAs do. So BAs hopefully will be talking more to, say, executive sponsor, to interview them, to truly understand the I guess the essence of that problem or the opportunity that they want to capitalize on. And on the other hand, become more of advisors to their business sponsors rather than order takers, because they understand the capabilities of technology better. They understand the landscape of the company, the complexity, the different projects, because of course they talk to other business analysts, they exchange knowledge and information, they know what's
Mm.
going on. So they can help their sponsors to formulate better requirements because they advise them. So I think the role of internal consultant should be more on our mind, not just someone who runs around capturing user stories.
Yeah. Internal management consultant, trusted advisor, definitely. And I almost think not just necessarily helping to shape requirements, but to shape goals, shape objectives, to unpack the critical success factors, the KPIs that support
Yeah.
them, and really drive out some of that strategic stuff, because it's about business change, isn't it? It's the end in mind, and the end in mind is increase in revenue, more customers giving repeat business. And it would be wonderful if we could take that. I mean, a phrase I've used in the past, and it's more of a mantra perhaps, that I, by repeating, may come true rather than a reflection of how things are right now. But I feel like BAs could be the CEO's army, unleashed on the organization to go forth, to have a look around, and to come up with
Yeah.
some of those creative ideas.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I like it. It's like the agent that you inject in your blood and it goes around and checks everything, right?
Yes, like that. And a word that's possibly not been said yet, but I think's coming through. In order to do that, inquisitiveness, curiosity, right? We've got to want
Yeah.
to poke our nose in.
Yes. Yes. We want to get that primary information, right? To do the research, to ask questions, and to I guess not be afraid of what we can find, because the challenge was that is you may find a skeleton, or you may find a bigger problem than what you expected. So I think that inquisitiveness comes along with, you need a little bit of a bravery to
Yeah,
go against, maybe against the group think, and standing up if you discovered something and you disagree maybe with the direction, or how sometimes projects, the scope gets cascaded down from above, but maybe what you discover invalidates some of it or
yeah,
requires that it's expanded. And it's sometimes scary to speak up. So I think that that internal advisory role also is to help you be able to be more vocal, because based on the nature of your work, you can actually discover some strange or interesting or important things faster than anybody else, because you're digging around, right? You're like
mm,
you're poking your microphone everywhere, you're looking into things, opening up the dustbins and so on. So you may be discovering things just like journalist or investigator, but what are you going to
yeah,
do with those discoveries, because they may be important. So I think also being, I guess, more brave, and maybe that's part of what leaders and industry need to keep supporting that, so that
yeah,
business analysts are, a little bit more empowered and not scared to do that, because eventually it is all for the benefit. And I think that if I were to try and, I guess, summarize what analysts need to be striving for, it's to reduce waste. I mean, if you think about the typical organization, there is so much waste for various reasons: political, historical, economical. But we are all wasting resources and money and time everywhere. And
yeah,
that's not a good thing for us as humanity. So I think business analysts are in a good position to try and help reduce waste in businesses, which,
yeah,
in turn, hopefully will help everybody else.
yeah. No, it will. And I feel like there's some irony in there, because organizations are about trying to get rid of waste, but at the same time, they actually create alternative waste, different waste in parallel.
They do. Yeah. Waste is very difficult to get rid of.
It's very, we come up with new creative ways of making waste once we've eradicated the last lot of waste. Um, so inquisitiveness, being that investigator, almost like a detective, I'm thinking we're looking for evidence, right? You've talked about data, so data's going to be evidence of certain things, certain facts. You've talked about viewpoints, different perspectives, but also the need to get many people's perspectives so we don't just rely on that one particular person's view on things. It's about being collective, reducing waste. I think you've had a great dream today for business analysis.
I will continue to dream.
Yeah, we must. I think we must because it's through having aspirations of these dreams that I think we are going to be affect some change in this profession.
Yeah, and this is why we are all doing what we are doing, right? We are speaking and writing and talking about how business analysis should involve. This is why.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic, and I think that's a great note to end on. That we need to reduce waste and just make this profession better and make it better for the organisations and the customers that we do it for.
Absolutely. I think
Uh,
so.
Well, thank you for being here on the pod with me, Yulia. It's been a lot of fun. It's been great talking with you.
Thank you, Joe. Great questions, and I enjoyed our chat. And hopefully, some of these things will come true soon.
I'm sure they will. I wish you the best in growing your business analyst future and those of the people that you help too. Thank you.
Thank you.